Hey everybody, Andrew Hogue here, your security, privacy, and forensics expert. And this is part 5 in my series using GitHub Copilot X to build a simple Hacker News reader in iOS. Today is day 2 of developer housekeeping, and I need to set up a proper Git repository and setting up a workflow. I'm going to follow the GitHub flow, which I will put a link to in my blog, where I basically have a main branch, and that's where basically all the tested code and production code goes. And then for any feature that I want to add, I'm going to create a feature branch. And then lastly, I will use pull requests in order to merge that work into main. As before, I'm trying to kind of retrain myself to use GitHub Copilot X, and in particular, the Copilot chat, so that I don't have to jump around to like other searches and browsers and things of that sort to ask some of these common developer questions that I have. All right, let's dive right in. So I did a little bit of experimentation ahead of time and ended up finding out that it's really difficult with Xcode if you try to fight it and use other IDEs to start things. So for the most part, I'm going to use Xcode to originate, for example, new files and a new project. And then I will use other tools like GitHub.com or VSCode for the actual coding and management of the developer workflow. But I can go ahead and create a new blank repository. So you just come out to your GitHub account and click new. And then I'm going to call this simple HN reader, which is available. And I'm going to make this public. So I have this description that I had previously written, and I'm just going to throw that in there real quick. And one of the key tips here is don't add anything right now. It certainly would be great to like add an MIT license and things of that sort. But if you do that, it makes it a little bit harder to pull in the initial code that Xcode is going to create for you. So I'm going to go ahead and create repository. And then one of the nice things here is that this little section gives you the steps for creating a new repository from the command line or things of that sort, or pushing an existing repository. So I'm going to just kind of show you how I do this. So the next thing I'm going to do is come over to Xcode, and I'm going to create a new Xcode project. I'm going to make this an iOS app. Let's call this simple HN reader. And then I'm going to do Swift UI, Swift, and I'm going to go ahead and include tests this time, just because down the road I'm interested in leveraging Copilot to see if I can write unit tests, which I really don't do as a developer, and I really ought to. So then we want to go out there and store this on our computer. I usually keep everything under a Git folder in my home directory, but lately for this iOS stuff, I've just been storing it out in a directory called How to iOS. And usually I would create a folder and then Xcode would create the same folder again. So I've kind of learned to just pick that parent level folder and click create. And I'm not going to do the Git repository just because I'm used to doing it command line, and I'm going to follow the directions on GitHub's website. So I'm just going to go ahead and click create here. So this will give us our basic Swift UI setup that we've seen in the past. And then I'm going to come back over real quick. And so now you can use GitHub's UI to just kind of quickly commit this new repository from the command line. So you're just going to init a Git repository. Then you're going to add some files. You're going to commit them. You're going to create your first branch, which we're going to call main. And then you're going to add this remote origin, which this is kind of the hardest one to remember. So I'm going to copy that one. And then ultimately, you're just going to push origin to main. So let's pop over to a command line tool. And actually, normally I would go into iTerm, but I'm going to go ahead and just go into VS Code. And so I'm going to open up the project. So we've got our code sitting here. And then as I learned last time, I can just do a control backtick to drop into a command line terminal. And since we're going to do a little bit more work here, I'm going to expand this. So again, we're just sitting in this directory that Xcode just created for us. And I'm going to go ahead and do a git init. And then one of the really important things here for iOS is that you want to have a git ignore file. And you can create these by hand, you can reuse them, but there's actually a website out there that helps you do it. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to go to gitignore.io. And then you can come out here and just kind of talk about what languages you're using. I'm going to go ahead and say Swift There's no Swift UI, so I'm going to just say Swift, and then I'm going to say Xcode, and then I'm going to hit create. So here you can see that we've got a git ignore file that's going to be really helpful in making sure that we don't check things into our project that we don't really want in source control. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this, and then I'm going to come back over to my terminal. Again, I'm largely a command line person, so I guess it's a little awkward because people would normally probably do this in VS Code, but I'm just going to go ahead and do this with Vim real quick in the terminal. So you're going to just create a git ignore file. And then in here, I'll just go ahead and paste this stuff in. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file. So we can go ahead and close down this git ignore file. And then if you remember on the directions, we're going to now add a file or a series of files. We're going to commit, we're going to create our first branch, and then we're going to add the remote origin, and then we're going to go ahead and upload it. So if I come back in here, one of the things you can do the first time around is it's just, you could add them all individually, but I'm just going to go ahead and do a git add -a. And this is literally going to add all of these files and say, okay, I want these to be committed into my Git repo. If you do a git status now, you'll see that you don't just have these directories, but you'll actually see the contents of the particular files here. And so next I'm going to do is a git commit. And then I'm going to do a -a -m, which is like commit all of these files and use the same comment. Now, generally, you don't want to do that, but you're not normally doing that kind of initial load up of your kind of boilerplate code. So I think this is perfectly fine. And I'll just say initial code structure from Xcode new project. Okay. So now I've got all of those committed. And so again, if you're curious and you see status here, you could see like, okay, I don't have anything new to commit. I'm working on the most up to date, but this is where we're gonna wanna come back, and then we're going to want to create a branch, and then we're gonna wanna add that remote origin. So here we're gonna do a git branch, and this is gonna create a new branch, and we're gonna call this main. So now we have a main branch that we're working in. And so the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and add this remote origin. So this is going to say, all right, take this, create the remote origin on github.com under this project. And now the last thing that we want to do is push the changes from origin to main. And so this is now going to actually push this up to GitHub. Now, if we come over and take a look at our repo now, and I just hit Control R here, you're going to see that we actually have code in here. Now, we're missing a README file, and we should really put in a license file, which I'll handle in a little bit. But this is great. You've got your initial commit that's sitting out there. I've actually limited these things to 30 minutes, and I've pretty much run out of time. So I'm going to actually stop the video, and then I'm going to come back and collect my thoughts and put together a better video that shows you how to do the next steps on creating the workflow. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.